In this video, we're going to generate the public address ID value. And the difference between ID and the address ID is that the ID is a generated value, and when our record is inserted in database, this value is auto-incremented. For example, if this record is going to be the very first record, then the value of generated ID will be 1, and then the second record will have a value of ID 2, and then the third record will have ID value 3, and so on. So this value is auto incremented. And if we use this ID value in HTTP request, then malicious user can easily guess what would be the next ID in our database record. So if we were requesting address details for ID 4, then most likely we will have a record with ID 5, and then ID 6, and then ID 7, and so on. So if we do not want our ID to be predictable, we use public address ID, which is an alphanumeric value and is made of random characters. This ID is impossible to predict, and this ID is safe to pass around the network. So we've added this field to our address entity, and we've added this field to address DTO, but we don't have a code that generates it. Although we do have a code example of how to generate random alphanumeric value for ID when we were working on the user entity, when we were creating user ID. And that code is inside of shared package, inside of the utility class. So if I open this one, we have generate user ID, which is making use of generate random string. So what I can do, I can leave generate user ID as is, and I can create a new method that will generate address ID like this. And I will now use this public method that generates address ID to generate address ID for my address entity, which is then going to be persisted in database. So I think we're done with the address entities and address DTO. So let's now go into a service layer and make some changes there so that we can run this example and experience the complete flow.